In a classic organizational psychology study, a company was desperate to improve their productivity. The company manufactured high-end light bulbs that in part needed to be assembled by human workers. They pleaded, they discussed, they set quotas, but they eventually hired a psychologist. The psychologist toured the factory and noticed the lighting was rather dim on the factory floor. Ironic, right? Well, they turned up the lights and lo and behold, productivity increased. They figured, hey, why not make it even brighter? So they did. And again, productivity went up. They did this a third time, and again, productivity went up. At this point, the psychologist noticed how incredibly bright it was on the factory floor and was puzzled. So he asked one of the women working there, hey, what's going on? Well, she said, it's awfully bright now, and we're not sure what you guys are trying to do, but it's clear that you really care. You're working hard to make things better for us. So the least we can do is make some more light bulbs. Mystery solved. Welcome to our lecture on advanced behavioral techniques, where we'll look more deeply at strategies to alter our behavior in sometimes paradoxical or unexpected ways. Let's first do a quick behavior refresher, then add in some more tools. First, recall the CBT triangle: emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. Behavior occupies a key position in influencing how we think and how we feel. Remember, it's not just about doing something that feels good. We need a healthy mix of behavior to create and support our well-being. Behaviors can give us a sense of connection, empowerment, agency, energy, achievement, affiliation, and of course, enjoyment. And in working to change our behaviors, we developed a heightened sense of confidence and control. In our last lecture, we looked at behavioral activation, activity records, activity scheduling, and graded task assignment. Today, we'll look at 4 more categories of behavioral techniques: somatic quieting, contingency management, exposure, and behavioral experiments. Plus, we'll look at ways people get stuck and what we can do about it. Now, as the name implies, somatic quieting is a way for us to quiet or soothe our bodies. It targets the physical arousal that often accompanies stress or anxiety. In the past, Herb Benson has called this the relaxation response and has written extensively about the biological effects of relaxation. I think of somatic quieting really as a collection of behavioral strategies that directly affect emotional tone and/or physical arousal. There's both physical and emotional, and maybe even cognitive benefits as we get better at focusing, at concentrating on our somatic quieting strategy. Now, strategies might include breathing exercises, meditation, guided imagery, and progressive muscle relaxation, but it could also include prayer, soothing activities, biofeedback, or even massage. Whether you think you're good at this or not, all of us have developed self-soothing habits. Some of us read, take a bath, eat ice cream, listen to music. There's really a lot of choices. But somatic quieting is a bit different. It's an intentional and well-rehearsed intervention that explicitly targets arousal. And like any skill, the more you practice, the better you get at it. Even if you already have a regular practice, like, say, yoga or meditation, I would encourage you to try something else out. Just see how it feels. Now, in our prior courses, we've covered stress physiology in great detail, and we've done quite a few meditation exercises. So this time, I'd like to try something a little bit different and talk about ways to enrich our body awareness. For most of us, we go throughout the day focused on the tasks at hand, and we give little thoughts to our back, to our neck, to our feet, really to any physical sensation until it screams for our attention. Body awareness is a sort of somatosensory mindfulness. It helps us sense and eventually appreciate our amazing bodies. First, as with most of these skills, it's about attitude. It's okay to be a skeptic, but try it out. Adopt an attitude of agency and control, an attitude of open-mindedness, of perceived value, and a willingness to just test it out and see what happens. First, you'll want to find a comfortable place, close your eyes, and direct your attention inward. This is sometimes called a body scan. Most folks will direct their inner eye to a particular body part, like starting at their toes, then slowly working their way up. What is it that you notice? You want to develop a vocabulary so that you can better describe what it is you're feeling or you're sensing. Do you feel pressure there? Is it even, uneven, supportive, crushing, strangling, tickling? Do you feel changes in air temperature or air current even? Is it gentle, cool, hot, dry, or moist? Are you noticing any tension? Is it solid, tight, inflamed, strong? Any pain? Is it stabbing, prickling, electrical, burning, gnawing, or throbbing? Do you feel any itching, any tingling? What's the temperature like? As you move your attention higher and higher, what is it that you notice? As you move through this process, you might find your respiration rate slowing, and you might find yourself naturally relaxing. If not, you can subtly slow and deepen your breaths, and you can begin to add in other sensations or images that can help you to relax. My favorite is to imagine a warm wave lightly massaging away any tension. Since it is often more difficult to think of a somatic quieting activity when you need it the most, I would recommend creating a menu of choices ranging from simple, quick exercises like a couple of deep breaths while you're standing at an elevator to complex and expensive like taking a yoga class or getting a massage. If possible, test drive these menu items in advance so you'll know if you need to make any adjustments in order to make them work. Now, I'd like to go out on a limb a bit and suggest there's something more powerful and deep going on than just learning how to relax your muscles. By employing this level of self-care, by prioritizing how your body and mind feel, you're engaging in the process of building self-compassion. Meditators often talk about the 3 areas of growth that arise from meditation: somatic quieting, concentration, and self-acceptance, and maybe a 4th, feeling more aware and more connected to something larger than themselves. I think there are a lot of somatic quieting exercises that can get you there. It's something about the quiet that allows us to hear and maybe see things that we missed before. It's something about the practice and the patience that helps us see and accept our limitations. Sure, it's a behavior, but I encourage you to test it out and see if it can't be more than that. Just to give you an example, I recently had a booster session with a woman I treated for depression about 2 years ago. She leaned heavily on CBT and mindfulness meditation as her tools. She's still depression-free, and she told me about a transformation in the mantras that she used for meditation. She used to repeat things like, "Let me be free from fear, anger, and pain," and she found this quite helpful. But then she noticed that her mantra shifted to, "Let me embrace fear, anger, and pain." She felt stronger and more accepting of both the good and bad emotions in her life. But finally, her mantra changed to something that brought tears to the eyes for both of us. "I'm perfect just the way I am." She's done a lot of wrestling with thoughts, and she's done a lot of rewriting core beliefs. She used her CBT toolbox a lot, and all to good effect. But now she's in a place of full self-acceptance. She'll still need her tools, but she will no longer needs to think that there's something wrong with her. She no longer needs to be someone else. She's perfect just the way she is. Transformation. Let me share just one more variation on somatic quieting that I've recently been trying out. It's a mix of gratitude and body-scanned mindfulness. You do the body scan as before, noting the sensations and the feelings. But as you're on that journey, thank each body part and reflect on how amazing they are. I know the cynics are cringing, and I did too at one point, but really, just look at your hand. Just look at each finger. Wiggle them, move them, clench them into fists. Think about all the complex things we can do with our fingers. Fingers can play the piano. Fingers can speak ASL. They can give a tender caress. They can even help us to do math. Think about your core. It holds you up the entire day, and we barely even notice it's there and working hard. Think about your vocal cords, the sounds that we can make, an opera singer, the sound of laughter. Feel the ancestors visible in your face. Our bodies are miracles, and how magnificent it feels to notice and to appreciate that. Of course, even the best laid plans can fall through. We can have the best of intentions, but maybe we're too busy, we don't remember, it's too boring, we're too easily distracted, or maybe we feel physically unwell. Remember, it's all grist for the mill, and you now have tools to help you pass this. Try graded task assignment. Try something else from your somatic quieting menu. Try forgiving yourself and picking it back up tomorrow. Or perhaps use our next behavioral tool, contingency management. Now, contingency management refers to the application of operant conditioning, which uses rewards and punishments to change behavior. Your behaviors are rewarded, or less often punished, based on a predetermined rulebook. Contingency management is used in non-clinical settings all the time. You earn rewards with points you accrue. You get fined for breaking a rule or a law. The challenge is thinking about how to set this up in a way that promotes the behavioral changes that you want. To understand this, we have to go back to our ABCs: antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, or the contingency. This is classic operant conditioning from B.F. Skinner. If we want to change a behavior, we need to figure out why it's been hanging around. There must be some kind of reinforcement. Are there rewards? Or is the behavior removing something negative, like avoidance behaviors does for the removal of anxiety? Next, you'll want to alter the C, or the consequences. Again, that's the contingencies. A classic example comes from smoking cessation. For each day you don't smoke, put $5 in a jar. If you make it to 1 year, you'll have a terrific vacation fund to spend on yourself. Let's look at an example for a case of Amanda. Now, Amanda's jealous of her brother, and she's angry that he's their parents' favorite. The antecedent, she sees her brother in a good mood talking with her parents. The behavior is that Amanda gets surly, she feels upset, and she withdraws. She stops talking to other people. The consequence, or the contingency here, is her mother goes after her and offers her lots of love and attention and affection. So that's a reward that promotes that same behavior. Now, if you were to adjust the system, I want you to think about how you might change either the A, the B, or the C. Would you target Amanda? Would you target the brother? Would you target her mother? I think this is something that parents deal with all the time as we try to shape behaviors, and we're never quite sure exactly where we should start. Next up for our toolbox, we have exposures. And here we're really talking about facing your fears rather than avoiding them or relying on rituals to distract you and help you feel safe. Avoidance and safety behaviors are completely understandable, but they're ultimately self-defeating. Prevention of exposure through avoidance allows irrational fears to persist or even amplify. Simple phobias are a good example where irrational fears can persist and cause quite a bit of impairment. What's the cure? Exposure. I want us to think of exposures, though, on a more everyday level. Now, there are important therapy techniques like creating a SUDS hierarchy, where you create a fear ladder and slowly work your way up, using exposures each step of the way until you no longer feel anxiety. But I don't think you have to have an anxiety disorder before you can use exposures. What are the things or people or places that you avoid? If it's driven by irrational fears, then exposures might be the tool to use. Here are just a few examples. How about traveling to a foreign country and try speaking a new language? How about talking with people outside of your political bubble? How about talking to a random stranger one day out in public? Remember that feeling uncomfortable doesn't mean you're unsafe. You want to stretch yourself, you don't want to break. And one last note on exposures, and it's a tricky one to make. Other than making sure the fear really is irrational, you want to set yourself up for success. That might mean taking a small step first, maybe getting a little bit of social support to help you through those first few shaky steps. For me, I was a sensitive, awkward kid that was intimidated by jocks and sports. Playing sports was terrifying, and of course, the more anxious I got, the worse I was at sports. In a way, it created a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. In this case, just throwing me onto a sports team would be exposure, but it might backfire. I needed the right environment, either the right sport, or more importantly, the right coach to make sure it would be a positive experience. Fortunately, I found a great track and field coach and a great crew coach who not only helped me build confidence, but actually enjoy the sport that I was playing. So if you try exposures and you feel worse, take a step back, see if you can find a better environment to help you with those first few wobbly steps. This brings us to our last behavioral skill to add to our toolbox, the behavioral experiment, or consciously engaging in a behavior to test out an idea or prediction. If you think an activity won't be fun, test it out. If you think you're too tired to get out of bed, Test it out. You can argue with yourself all you want, but the best way to prove or disprove an idea is to do an experiment and test it out. There are at least a couple of types of behavioral experiments. The first is called a discovery experiment. These are more about wanting to learn more about anything in general by collecting data. Here, you don't really have a hypothesis to test, like people will reject me if I say hello, but maybe you want to learn more about how often others feel rejected or what they do to express interest in another person. It's almost like doing field research or a field survey. The second, more common type is a hypothesis testing experiment. Sometimes we have a very clear prediction or belief about ourselves or about others. Rather than rely on our assumptions, our habits of mind, here we test it out. Pleasure predicting is a good example of a hypothesis testing experiment. There are a few simple steps to set up a behavioral experiment, and here we're mostly talking about hypothesis testing. So step one, you want to identify the belief to be tested. What is the belief that went through your mind? What is the belief you've captured on your thought record? Write it down in a single sentence. Step two, rate the strength of that belief. And here it can be on a simple 1 to 10 scale. Step three, plan the experiment that could test the belief. If we go back to our example of people will reject me if I say hello, then you probably want to go out in the world and say hello to different people and see what happens. Step four, identify any obstacles that might make it difficult to carry out the experiment. 5, this is when you actually step outside, test it out, write down the data. Now you've done the prior preparation, you know the belief, you know the experiment, and after you do it, you of course are going to do step 6, recording the result, and step 7, reflecting on your results. Now let's take a quick look at what this looks like in action with our case of Amanda. So Amanda, you've done a great job with the thought records, challenging some of the automatic thoughts that came up around being kind to others and some of the concerns about the response they would have or being taken for granted. I think now we want to move to the next step. So you've wrestled with it on paper, you've been able to effectively regulate or manage some of your emotions, but the way to really change those thoughts and bring about sort of lasting change in those thoughts is to do a behavioral experiment about kindness.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about what that would look like. So you expressed the thought that, I think it was, if you give a mouse a crumb, he'll want the whole cookie. Right? So if you do a little acts of kindness, people are just going to want more and more and more and more and more. And there you are, always giving until you have nothing left, essentially.
Yeah.
So that was the belief. You were able to challenge it on paper, but now it's time to test it out in the real world. So what you would do, and here we have this idea of, is this true or not? We want to test it out just like everything else. So it means engineering, scheduling, planning, acts of kindness, those crumbs, right? And seeing what the response will be. On the one hand, it says they're going to take it for granted, they're going to want more, right? It's going to be exhausting, I'm going to end up feeling resentful. On the other hand, well, maybe they're appreciative and they enjoy it, and you feel good and they feel good, and it's a totally different outcome. We don't know until we test it out. So if you were going to do this behavioral experiment of these sort of small acts or act of kindness, what could you set up? It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be kind of a small doable thing.
Maybe I'd do something nice for my parents. Maybe like make dinner for them or something like that. Make a nice dinner for them.
Okay. And what are the two possible scenarios that you see, or these two hypotheses that we're testing?
Well, if I make a very nice dinner for them this one night, that, the expectation's going to be, well, you should do this every night, or you should do this more often. Or it could be, that was a really great dinner. Thank you for making it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the end of it,
okay.
I guess.
Okay, all right. So we have two, and maybe there's sort of middle ground too, other directions that things might go. We don't know until you try it out. So maybe in this next week, you can talk to your parents and figure out a good night, figure out what kind of dinner you want to make, sort of set things up, put your best foot forward, those acts of kindness, and then see what happens. Does that sound doable for this next week?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay,
I can do that.
great. And when you come back next time, I'll check in with you and we'll see what happened.
Okay.
Okay, great. Here, the activity is set up as a real-world test of a belief. We can work it out on paper, but experiencing it is far more convincing. Let's see what happened in this next clip. So Amanda, I believe you had some homework, a behavioral experiment where you were going to test out some beliefs about kindness. So tell me how that went. What happened?
So I decided I was going to make dinner for my parents. So we picked a Wednesday night, which was a night that they weren't busy, and I decided I'd make for them broccoli chicken Alfredo.
Okay.
And dinner went really well. They were really appreciative. They were very complimentary about the dish and all of that. I actually did dishes afterwards, which was really good for them. So basically it was just kind of sit down, have a nice meal, and not have to worry about the cleanup or anything like that. And, you know, it went well. It went well. I was actually very surprised. I kind of, you know, my mom was like, well, you know, this was really good. You know, we should probably do something like this more often. But she didn't make it sound like it was something she wanted me to do every day. Right. But, you know, it felt good to hear that you know, they appreciated what I was doing for them.
Yeah. So it sounds like that was a positive experience for you. And how about that belief? It was, I believe it was, if you give a mouse a crumb, he'll want a cookie.
Right.
So how did that belief hold up?
I didn't get the impression from them that they wanted the whole cookie. I think that what I took away is that they were appreciative of the crumb.
Yeah.
And if there was opportunity to have more crumbs later, that's great. But if not, then just getting that was good. Okay. So I was really surprised at that. I really kind of thought that it would be the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you had a positive experience. In that sort of experiment, we were testing out a belief, and it seems like that belief was not confirmed. It, you know, at least for now, it's just one event. But it also sounds like it was an activity, like we did activity scheduling before, that had a boost in mood, not just for you, but also for your parents. And I'm thinking too of, you know, a few weeks ago, your brother came home for dinner and it wasn't such a good experience. And here it was just the three of you. It was something that just you shared with your parents. And I'm wondering if maybe some point down the road we can think of activities, a time, a place, a something that's just yours and your parents, right? It's not part of your brother, it's not part of that dynamic, it's just an opportunity for the three of you to enjoy being with each other. Would that be something worth exploring?
Yeah, I think I would like that.
Okay, great. Let's keep that on our list then.
Okay.
So what did she learn? What are the next steps for her? Should she do an experiment with her brother? What would be the belief that she's testing out? Remember those steps of what we need to go through in order to set it up to be successful. Remember, we have to have a solid rationale, then design the experiment as a test of that specific belief or thought. Let me leave you with just one last clip, one that I hope illustrates the importance of troubleshooting. Our plans don't always have to work out, but that doesn't mean that we have to give up. Let's take a look at David, the 73-year-old man battling a recurrence of cancer. So David, I believe your homework from last time was some activity scheduling. We had looked at an activity record and you had planned some activities for this past week. There was a dinner with your wife, there was going for a walk, and not big activities, but there were some activities that you were hoping to do. Why don't you tell me how that went and how it affected your mood?
Well, the best laid plans, you know, especially in the circumstances, don't always work out for me or my wife in this case, because I just, my energy level just bounces all over the place. And so, well, okay, we're going to go do this now and then, or later this evening or something, like out to dinner. Yeah. And I just ran into some real issues in the, you know, in my colon area. Okay. And going out to dinner was not going to work out. Got it. And we just, you know, we ended up just hanging around home, which was better for me anyway. And okay. You know, so we I don't know, we just We just sat around on the front porch and kind of just watched the world go by and tuned into some sounds and various things. And I tried to ignore my issues as much as I could. But I'll tell you something. In many ways, it was a better evening for that than I might have had going out to dinner. I didn't want to disappoint my wife, but.
Right. And was she disappointed?
She rolls with the punches really well, especially now. You know, I mean, she can appreciate the fact that any effort I make to do something together is an effort, and I really appreciate that. But I'm sure she was disappointed. But
so let's pause there and think about the homework exercise, the obstacles that emerged, and the workaround that you found. So the homework was we're working on activities and increasing or altering the nature of activities that you choose in order to give yourself a mood boost. And you came up with some activities, but like you said, best laid plans, and especially when we're working with a chronic progressive disease, you might have limited energy, you might have physical pain. You said you had some GI issues that came up that made going out to dinner sort of not the best plan at that particular time. And those are all very real, and those do happen. But I think in those situations, it's important to remind yourself that, okay, I can't do plan A, but I can have a plan B. And it sounds like your plan B was to go on the porch with your wife and just spend some time together, right? Just watching the evening going by and enjoying being next to each other.
Yes, and it worked. I really enjoyed it, actually.
Okay. So you could have, if we look at the different behavioral choices, you could have just gone to your room and closed the door, right? Or you could have just camped out in the bathroom and just stayed there. You could have taken some medications and gone to sleep. And so there are a lot of choices, right? But the choice that you made was to still do something with your wife. Go outside, maybe you've done that a lot, I don't know, and enjoy, you know, the evening with her and spending time together. That sounds like a fantastic plan B. And what you did was to take the unit of experience from this sort of big fancy dinner you guys were going to go to, and you shrunk it down to something, not in a diminishing sort of way, but just in a smaller, more poignant way. So it didn't cost any money, right? It didn't take a whole lot of energy, but it was still something that was meaningful. And I would push back just a little bit. I'm not sure your wife was disappointed. We can ask her, right? We can see if she was or not. But a dinner is a dinner. And spending time with someone you love, that's the good stuff.
And that quality time that I believe is, you know, it's going to diminish when I have less and less occasions to appreciate those kinds of times. And so it was good in a sense that I had that at that moment, because next week, who knows?
And you're right, and I want you to think some about this idea of unit of experience, because as you do, you know, get sicker, you have more symptoms. You know, we're going to work with your medical team, your palliative care doctor to minimize shortness of breath, to minimize abdominal pain, to make sure you're as comfortable as possible. But that unit of experience may get smaller and smaller, so it's not going on a trip, it's not even going to dinner, right? It might be, you know, cuddling with your wife and watching a TV show that you both really love. It might just be having everyone sit in the same room, you know, and look at funny old pictures together and share stories. It might be calling up your sister, you know, doing a video chat with her and reminiscing about old times when you were kids and used to get in trouble. Those aren't grand gestures, they're small things, but they're precious things, and you have an opportunity now to reflect on them or to even intentionally engineer them so that you make room for them in your life. Even though that room is very small, energy and resources are small, that doesn't mean that you can't mindfully do something that can help you and help your family. So let's think then about units of experience. And as we do activity scheduling, and I think we should do another one, we'll think about plan A activities, right? So if everything lines up and you feel fine and you have energy, then do plan A. If things aren't going so well physically, symptom-wise, then there's a plan B, or maybe there's even a plan C. But there's always choices, and I think that's the point. It doesn't have to be big or grand, but just making a choice that maximizes the positive time that you can spend with your family, doing things that you both enjoy. So let's go back to our toolbox and see what we have. The skills in this lecture fit pretty solidly in the behavioral section. Remember, we need the foundational knowledge in understanding how and why behavior affects mood and wellness. We need the very basic but sometimes tricky skills of identifying what are behaviors, and if they're complex behaviors, then being able to break them down into smaller parts. Remember that not getting out of bed is a behavior, eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's is a behavior, as are calling a friend and going to church. The last lecture was all about behavioral activation, activity records, activity scheduling, and graded task assignment, or breaking things down into smaller pieces. We learned about things we want to do and things we have to do, how both pleasure and accomplishment are important. In today's lecture, we added some new behavioral strategies: somatic quieting, contingency management, exposures, more on that in our anxiety lecture, and behavioral experiments, creating an experience to test out a belief. You can see that some of these behavioral tools are already pairing up with cognitive tools we'll use later, like behavioral experiments that test out a belief, really a cognition. Remember the CBT triangle and the interconnectedness of this whole system. Find your favorite tool, and you may just be able to alter the whole system. In our next lecture, we'll move to the cognitive corner of our triangle and begin adding new cognitive tools to our toolbox. Thank you.